Okay. And we're live here. Just going to give a minute or two for people to start jumping on. Again, Wisconsin right now, uncensored. Jim Pivovarczyk, Scarlett Johnson, Jessica McBride will be jumping on hopefully shortly. And we are our guest this morning for a breaking news story. It's coming out of Prairie. And we have Will attorney Dan Lennington. And it's interesting, just last night we had Will President Rick Essenberg on discussing the Supreme Court race and the loss and the liberal control of courts and what it means now to us. And we talked about how important Will is to conservatives in Wisconsin. And now this morning we have just like the perfect scenario, an example as to why Will is leading the way and fighting for us. And Dan, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Again, just to highlight what we've got going on, Will is demanding the answers as to what happened at Prairie High School locker room when 14-year-old girls were showering and an 18-year-old biological male who identified as transgender showered nude with them.
Yes.
It's a shocking story. And Dan, thank you very much for, again, fighting for us. And go ahead, tell us what you know.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So we were contacted by some parents who told us this alarming story, and it's alarming not only because of what happened. No girl should have to go through this in a public school, a place where they're supposed to be safe, but alarming as to how the school district responded to the incident, which is the most concerning, and I think the most important for parents to think about and parents to become engaged and become aware of what's going on in their school district. So on March 3rd, 4 freshman girls had just finished a swim class. As was their normal routine, they would go rinse off in the shower with their bathing suits on to get chlorine off their body, as most people do after they go swimming in a public pool. This was part of a first hour class, a normal part of the PE curriculum. And when they entered the locker room, they observed an 18-year-old male in the locker room near the lockers in the bench area. They had said that they understood that this person identified as trans and had previously used girls' bathrooms. So although perhaps a little bit concerned, they then proceeded to the shower and showered off. After they entered the shower, the male entered the shower next to the girls as they were showering. He fully undressed, became completely naked, and said to them, "I'm trans, by the way," as in, it's okay, I'm trans. He started to shower facing the wall, but then turned to them and exposed his male genitalia to the girls, and continued to do so right next to one of the 4 girls. He was standing right next to them. This wasn't a situation where it was separated, and if that were to make a difference, but it was right next to them.
Oh, God.
So these are 14-year-old girls. This was an 18-year-old male. We have multiple sources saying that this male is 18. The school district has not denied that he was 18 when this happened, and that's significant for a number of reasons we could talk about later. But the girls were embarrassed, nervous, frightened, finished up as soon as they could, left the area immediately. This was a Friday, and I guess as most most women who have experienced sexual harassment probably can agree that perhaps they didn't want to talk about it and didn't want to report it.
Yes.
That is probably a concern. Scarlett, you could probably talk about that.
Yeah, that's something I want to reiterate, because some people may wonder, well, why didn't they report it right away? Why didn't they tell their parents right away? As a daughter of 4 girls, 3 of them, one of them now 21, and 2 teenagers, 1 preteen. When it comes to something like this, sexual assault or indecent exposure, at the very least, girls are going to clam up, and they're going to struggle to talk about this with their parents. They're going to worry that their parents are going to maybe make a fuss about it. They don't want anyone to know. And in this current climate, they're probably afraid to speak out against someone who is identifying as transgender. They're probably scared that if they say something, they will be the ones targeted and canceled.
Right. So that's a very good point. Thank you, Scarlett. And obviously, I can't speak from a female perspective. And so please chime in whenever I say something that you want to add to. But they did not tell anybody, except they told a sophomore friend on that Friday. And the sophomore friend, a little bit older, a little bit more mature, said, "You absolutely should report this. This is something that ought to be reported." Nothing happened over the weekend as far as the girls were concerned. On Monday, the sophomore girl who was not involved in the incident, she informed student services about the incident. Now, this was the first time the school became aware of this, and rather than informing the Title IX coordinator, which would be the mandatory duty,
Yes.
the associate principal, whose name was Heidi Walter, she asked for the names of the students involved, but the sophomore girl did not want to give the names up. And at that time, Monday, March 6th, nothing happened. On Friday, March 10th, a week later, the sophomore again had a meeting and was ready to provide the names of the girls. But the assistant principal said, "No, I don't want the names. If they want help, they can come to me. They can come to me. They can approach me if they wanted."
No.
Now, later to the parents, this principal admitted that was a mistake and said, "I should have, quote, dug deeper." So this is a week later. We've already got administrators admitting that they made a mistake. Now, what should have happened in this circumstances under Title IX? Title IX is the federal law that protects women's access to education, girls and women's access to education. Most famously, people think about Title IX when they think about sports, but it broadly prohibits sex discrimination, which includes sexual harassment. It imposes a number of duties on schools that receive federal funding. So any public school is required to follow Title IX. And so what should have happened is that they should have contacted the girls. They should have offered supportive services immediately. Mm-hmm. They should have provided them with an opportunity to file a complaint under Title IX, which has its own procedure.
Yeah.
But none of that happened. No one from the district also contacted the girls' parents. And we hear this all the time. Horrible things happening in schools, and the district refusing to contact the parents. No parents were contacted. These 14-year-old girls at this point in time, as far as we understand, the parents didn't know about it a week later. And so that's what we are on March 16th. Now we're getting 13 days later. One of the mothers finally found out about it and contacted the principal and the superintendent via an email, asked what the school was doing about it. The principal called and apologized, said this should not have happened, and then said, "That's okay, we have a policy to deal with this."
I want to interrupt real fast because Russ Ewert, who is the president of the Germantown School Board, just posted a comment where he said the administrators are provided zero wiggle room in incidents like this. Title IX compliance officer must be notified regardless of one party or second party reporting. And he understands the law and the policy regarding Title IX. So right off the bat, they are in the wrong.
Yes, that's correct. These Title IX is a federal law. It provides it's no wiggle room here for this district, and they should, by the way, all be trained in this. Yeah. Everybody should be trained. Anybody who's worked in a employment situation that's in the private sector knows you have sexual harassment training every year, knows how to report sexual harassment. Apparently in some Prairie area school district, there's no training on this because apparently no one knew what to do. So now we're 2 weeks later. It wasn't until March 29th, 23 days later,
wow,
that the principal responded to an inquiry from another parent, did not identify any applicable policy, Title IX procedures, and then set up a meeting that was supposed to happen on April 5th, which is over a month after this. So no meetings happened until April 5th. At this meeting, the parents asked, what was the policy? How you allowed this to happen? What's the policy going forward? No one at the meeting had a policy. No one could identify a policy. No one could point to anything about how this should go down. But they basically said, well, we have a policy to deal with this. Well, what is it? It wasn't until April 10th, so 5 days later, that they provided the parents with this, and we have it attached to our letter. It's this restroom and locker room accessibility policy. In the first sentence, Scarlett, you'll love this. The first sentence in this is, all Sun Prairie Area School District decisions are grounded in the school's equity framework.
Equity. Yep.
So before we get to girls, we got to talk about equity.
Yep.
So in this policy, they basically say that if a male wants to shower with females, the school only has to evaluate it if the male asks for permission to do it. Otherwise, the male's just free to go into the shower. There's no, this only is triggered if there's a request by a male to shower with girls. If the male just wants to go shower with the girls, apparently under this policy he can do it. That's,
wow,
that's what it says. And also, like many of these policies we've seen from school districts around the state and around the country, is that it puts the burden on the girl.
Yes.
It says things like, if you feel uncomfortable what's going on in the bathroom or locker room, we'll make sure you have a separate space. Yeah. That's precisely backwards. That's not how this is supposed to go down.
That's kind of like with the Leah Thompson situation, where any girls that were uncomfortable with her being in the locker rooms, with the male genitalia, if you were uncomfortable with that, they got you counseling. You were the one with the problem. This is something you need to deal with and just get over it. They're basically telling girls, you don't have a safe space, and we will discriminate against you sexually, a sex discrimination, in order to not hurt the boys' feelings.
Right. So that's where we are in the timeline. Our letter went out on April 19th, 2 days ago. It became a media story today. The Sun Prairie School District told Fox News that basically we got it all wrong. Everything's fine. There's a policy to address all this, but we can't talk about anything because of student privacy, which is what school districts always do. They hide behind these claims of privacy. Of course, they can talk about Title IX. Of course, they can talk about protecting girls, but they just don't want to talk about that because it makes them uncomfortable. Because what's very clear in this narrative is that their number one priority is the feelings of the transgender person in the bathroom exposing his penis to the girls. That's who they're concerned about. There's no evidence at all that this district is concerned about the girls, because they would have acted completely different. So the funny thing also is that they have a locker room policy that was passed by the board many years ago. It's on their website. If you just Google Sun Prairie locker room policy, it's the first result that comes up. So the fact that they had numerous meetings, numerous emails and phone calls, and when the parents asked for policies, no one at the school could identify the policy. They didn't even take the time to Google their own website to find their own policy. And this is what their actual policy says. The district shall observe measures intended to protect the privacy rights of individuals using the locker rooms. That's what it actually says. But what they provided them was this policy, which which I speculate, this is complete speculation. I believe this was made up after this incident actually occurred, because no one's ever seen it. It's not on any website. Now that's speculation. It might be false speculation, but that's what it appears like to us. And there's no denial from the school district. There's no date on this. The school district's never said anything about it. All they've done is cited to Joe Biden's policy on Title IX, which is not the law, which has been enjoined by courts, which says that that transgender identity is protected by Title IX when that's not what the law says, and which this is an actively litigated subject. That's what they're telling people. So what we have called for is the school needs to retrain their employees. They need to adopt policies to make sure this doesn't happen again. And they need to focus on what Title IX was meant to focus on, which is girls. Title IX is for girls. That is the purpose of the law. That's what it was intended to do. It was to prohibit discrimination and harassment of girls.
Yep.
Now, the fact that we want to inject transgender ideology into this law that's been on the book for 50 years now, school districts are, they should do this at their own risk, because what they're doing is they're watering down the very protections that were put in place for girls in the first place.
So, first of all, in all of this discussion, I always wonder what happened to the women's rights movement, right? I mean, obviously with the specific situation in Sun Prairie, we could talk more precisely, as you are, about policies, regulations, and Title IX requirements and mandatory reporting laws, and just the rights of parents to know what's going on with their children in the school setting with something like this, and all of that. And but in a broader sense, when I hear all of these conversations that are going around, the country and schools, I always think about with Leah Thomas and all that. Well, what about the intersection of those concerns and issues with women's rights? Like, if you're eradicating gender from society, how do you have women's rights? And I wonder, where are the feminists on that?
Yes,
like,
where
why
are the
aren't
feminists?
they up in arms over the fact that you don't have women's rights or women's rights movement if you're not identifying people as, or admitting that there's gender in society? And so I've always found that to be a really fascinating, broader question. When it comes to Title IX, like, I appreciated what you said about the original intent of Title IX, because I benefited from this. Like, I was a high school student in the 80s, and like, I benefited from from girls sports. Like, I was a volleyball player, all conference. I was a softball player. And I will tell you that being able to compete in sports, which Title IX obviously allowed, girls to do, gave me almost every single life skill that I use today, right? It allowed me to understand teamwork and being competitive and not giving up when, like, you're down for the count, and not giving up when maybe your coach doesn't think you're good enough to start, and you keep going at it. Every single trait that I ever learned that allowed me to succeed in sort of, for example, the business world, I learned on that athletic court. And so Title IX was created to empower and champion girls, and young women. And so to see their sort of right, their competing feelings, there's competing feelings here. There's competing claims of rights here. And to see their feelings, their claims, like, so just sort of not only thoroughly disregarded, but, this is the easiest way to get canceled, to be honest, today, is to talk about anything relating to transgender issues, especially in schools, number one, easiest way you can get canceled. And so I look, for example, at what is happening to Riley Gaines, and she goes to a university and she's like saying later, I was assaulted. It's going so far beyond even canceling to like her physical fear for her own safety and just sort of the destruction of her character that's going on, the attempts to cancel her. So I guess we're seeing this burst up. Yeah, we're seeing violence.
And that's okay.
We're seeing this burst up all over the country. And I guess this is the latest flare up in some Prairie. I'm just glad that Will exists to champion the rights of girls as well, because I'm not sure who else would be doing it if Will didn't exist.
And I want to say that I have not heard of a case like this where there is actually a biological man exposing himself and his genitalia to young girls in a shower. This is the first case I've actually heard of. There's been the hypothetical.
I've heard one.
Yeah, I've heard the hypothetical of this, and I've been told I'm crazy because I'm concerned as I have teenage girls, and I am petrified that when my daughter goes to high school and she is involved in every sport under the sun, she's extremely athletic, that she's 14 years old. So this hits home for me that her rights are violated, that I have to tell her, make sure you keep your bra and underwear on at all times, that you're never, that you never undress openly in the area, because you never know what could happen, because in public schools, you're not safe. There is no safe space for you. And I am appalled that it is the vast majority of girls, the overwhelming majority of girls, who, if they have a problem with it or if their parents have a problem with it, they're told, tough luck, too bad. We'll see if we can find some closet for you to change in, because one boy, we're not going to hurt. He feels like a girl and we can't hurt his feelings. This is wrong. This is not reality. This is anti-science. And it's time parents stood up and said this. And question number 2, where are the dads? Where are the dads? Because I know what would happen if I was 14 and this happened to me. My dad, heads would roll. I mean,
if that happened to my daughter, I'd be in that office ripping heads off. If that had happened to my daughter. Dan, I've got a couple questions for you. It's my understanding the 4 girls were wearing swimsuits at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Do we know why they had their swimsuits on?
Yes. So it's a swim class, and what I've heard from other females who have had swim classes is that this is pretty routine to do this, to rinse off with your swimsuit on, especially, the ladies can comment about this. A 14-year-old girl, I would assume, is insecure. Okay. And this might be a first exposure to having a communal shower, and being nervous and that sort of thing but it seems to me this is a fairly routine thing for girls to do.
So it's not that they were wearing their swimsuits because they were aware of his presence.
No, they did this before. They had done this before in other parts of the class when he was not there too.
And why was he there? He wasn't part of a class. Do we know why he was in that shower in the first place?
No, we have the school district has not told us and won't tell us because of his privacy. Has
law enforcement, to me, this seems like this is actually a criminal charge of indecent exposure. You have an adult male exposing himself to juvenile females. Has law enforcement been contacted to investigate this?
So one of the parents reported the incident to the school resource officer, who is an employee of the Sun Prairie Police Department. And perhaps you all can follow up with that angle to see what's been done. But I'm not, we don't accuse people of crimes, but we can say that there is a state law that is a criminal law that says if an adult exposes genitalia to a minor for the purposes of sexual gratification, that is a crime. So that would be up to law enforcement and the prosecutor to decide and to investigate those facts. So we know it has been reported. We don't know what's going on with that. Also, there is mandatory reporting in Wisconsin for a listed number of mandatory reporters are people like child care workers, teachers, doctors, nurses. If they have a reasonable suggestion that a child is subject to abuse, they must report that. That is a mandatory reporting duty, and abuse can include apparent violations of criminal laws that are meant to protect children. So I don't understand how this is not a mandatory report by the administrators who knew. The school district apparently their lawyer doesn't believe it's mandatory report, but all I know is that we have a very broad mandatory report law in Wisconsin. I know people who are subject to this law who are terrified of the law, that they're not reporting things they should report. If you are a mandatory reporter,
Wow.
you are made aware that you have important obligations under that law, and that I would say that if you are a mandatory reporter, you err on the side of reporting.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that the district would just brush off the idea that an 18-year-old male exposing his penis to 4 14-year-old girls, that it wouldn't even occur to them that the mandatory reporting law does not apply, and that there's not some sort of reasonable suspicion that perhaps it might apply, which is really their duty. And again, anybody with questions about this can just Google it and have the answer in 3 seconds. And if I'm an assistant principal, I can just type in Wisconsin, what are my duties for mandatory reporting? And the Department of Health Service has a whole website that explains it in detail what your duties are.
Well, and as we know from Prairie, they have attorneys readily available, because they would write cease and desist letters to parents that dared question why principals are reading, books to students about transgenderism. So we know they have access to those attorneys. So all they would do is give a simple call to one of their district attorneys to find out.
And imagine what they're saying to girls, what they're saying to teenage girls, that they are afraid to speak up for themselves. I'm only guessing this, but in my experience, I would imagine these girls were afraid because he's trans identifying. They were afraid of the backlash. They're afraid of what would happen to them on social media. Just like Jessica said, the surest way to get canceled these days is to be called transphobic, or to be called homophobic, or to be called some sort of phobic when you're a 14-year-old kid. And what they'll do to you on social media, the way that, look at what they're doing to Riley Gaines. Look at what they're doing to the feminists like Posey Parker, who speak up. And a lot of women that I know through Moms for Liberty, who we don't agree on much of anything. They are I'm very conservative, and they are traditionally very progressive. But on this issue of women's rights, just like Jessica said, what did we fight for? What have we been doing for the last 30, 40 years that we're now surrendering all of our protections and all of the safety because we are told to believe that somebody can feel like that a man can feel like a woman, and even if they completely look like a man and they have a penis, that we have to be silenced, we have to be shamed, we have to be quiet as they invade our space. And we're telling our girls, shh, be quiet, don't say anything, don't just let this happen to you. No, I say no. This cannot be the last generation that has equal opportunity provided through Title IX. My daughters cannot be in a generation that they are not protected. I refuse to let that be the case. That's what I have to say
And
about
I want to be clear. I want to be clear too. Like when we're talking about all these issues with transgender and all of this stuff, like I want to be clear. Like I don't care how people identify. If people want, I'm gonna be honest with you. If people want me to use their pronouns, I'll use their pronouns. If people think they're transgender, I have empathy for that. I think that would be a really difficult. It would be really difficult to feel like you're in the wrong body. I don't care if people are gay. I don't care if gay people want to marry other gay people. I'm of the belief that that's people's own business. But there's another set of questions here, right? So I think sometimes the left and the media and cancel culture, they want to extrapolate people with reasonable questions onto this other issue and try to say they're transphobic or they're against gays or they don't have empathy for people who feel like they're trapped in the wrong bodies. You can have empathy for those things. You can be supportive of people's right to, you know, be who they believe they are. Like, that's not my business. But you can also, I think, have concerns and raise obvious legitimate questions, such as those presented in a case like this. What about the rights of these teen girls, first and foremost? Why are the laws that exist not being activated in this situation with mandatory reporting? Why are the policies not being activated in this situation with the locker room policy, with Title IX requirements? I think the age differential here is obviously unusual and very concerning because in this case, I mean, I think it would raise questions obviously as well if the male, you know, if there was a 16-year-old and 14-year-olds or something. But here you have a situation where the person is 18, right? So you have a person who is an adult, and the girls are 14. I remember situations where, you know, there was situations where people were dating who were like 18 and 16 and the 18-year-old got charged with crimes. Like there was a notorious case, I don't remember the exact age range out of it, but out of Port Washington years ago. So I always think it's really troubling that cancel culture in the media and the left, they believe that all of those questions I just articulated and that you guys are articulating throughout this podcast, like you're not even allowed to ask for fear of being canceled and being called transphobic and all of these things. And I'll be honest with you, I think some of these school administrators and teachers and everything, I think they're afraid. Yeah. Because Jim and I get a lot of tips and emails from teachers. Yeah. But usually they go through like their spouse, and the spouse will contact us and say, this teacher is really upset about this audio being played to students or this transgender book being read to students or whatever. But they're too afraid to talk to us directly because they don't want to lose their job. And so like the spouse or a friend contacts Jim and I, and they're like, keep our name out of it, but here's the secret audio the teacher recorded. So like within the schools, I actually believe there are a number of teachers, maybe administrators, I don't know, but certainly teachers who are actually deeply concerned about this stuff. For every teacher that is on a crusade over it, there's someone else who's secretly deeply concerned. But I'll go back to my point, there is such a climate of canceling and of fear, literal fear. And I think sometimes these mind-boggling school decisions derive from that fear, right? Like they're worried that they're going to be canceled if they don't stand on the side of the 18-year-old in this story.
Well, you know, I think they're more afraid
of
this.
Wait, guys, can I stop 1 second? Let's just, before we go on too much further, I don't want to keep Dan too long if he has other obligations. Do we have any other questions for Dan? Or Dan, do you have anything else that you want to add?
I have a question for Dan regarding, I would like him to clear up, because I think a lot of districts, this is the most common question that I get. Right now, what is the current, as far as Title IX, when you're on a school board, what is the current law? What is the current policy that is correct? And I think a lot of school boards, like in Sheboygan Falls, they are being told that they need to adapt to Biden's Title IX proposals now, and to not do so is illegal. And my understanding is that is not true. So
Correct.
what is the state now, and what would things look like if Biden's proposals were adopted?
Well, first I'd like to say for school board members and parents and everything on our website, will-law.org, under the education portion, Restoring American Education, we have something called resources for school board members and resources for parents. And under the resources for school board members, it talks about right now exactly what your Title IX obligations are. And so it's very clear there. It's written by our top lawyers. If you're a school board member, you can print that off and download it and bring it to a meeting. And it explains exactly what school board's obligations are right now. Yes, Biden is trying to amend Title IX, but it is not on the books yet. Transgender identity, sexual identity is not protected under Title IX right now. They are trying to change that. And as we're seeing with this case, there are a lot of unintended consequences to adding transgender identity to Title IX. And a lot of the consequences are just eroding girls' rights and girls' protections. And so we show in this letter on page 4 at the bottom, we talk about how what the current status is of Title IX, and it does not protect gender identity right now. But there is a new rule, and people are allowed to comment on the new rule. And we've put out on our website places where people can comment on the new rule. But it's something we have to really watch carefully. And our Restoring American Education project on our website has all the resources that parents and school board members need. So that's the best place to go.
And so just to reiterate, anyone who's listening, you can comment on this proposed rule change. On the Will website, there is a place where, please comment, ask your spouse to comment, have your adult children comment. The more comments, they are required to read through these comments, and you have to let your voice be heard. Tell others. Just write something up really quick, voicing your opposition to the proposed Title IX changes. And it's my understanding, if these Title IX changes do take place, there's a lot of litigation going on right now. We may not have a Republican governor, but many states in this country do, and they're not simply going to go along with these changes. They're going to take these issues all the way up to the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Yes, there will definitely be litigation over the new Title IX policy when it's promulgated. They do have to go through all the comments. That's important, and they have to respond to certain comments. So we're sitting here in 2023. We're going to get here. We'll be summer of 2023 pretty soon. And a year later, you're going to be in the midst of a presidential campaign. And so the next president is going to decide really whether this regulation should go on the books or not, or whether Biden's regulation should be revoked. So it's going to be an issue in this upcoming campaign season too. So in 2024.
All right. Thank you, Dan, very much for joining us. And Jessica, you have anything else?
No,
Dan?
just thank you for the work that Will is doing, because again, it's so incredibly important. And now with the left controlling the Supreme Court, it's even more important. You're the cavalry. You're in the front lines. Thank you for everything you do.
Yeah, really.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all you do.
You're welcome. And parents can reach out to us through our website, and even if you're a parent who wants to remain anonymous, we can work with you and get the point across, even by keeping you anonymous too. So it's important for people to be brave and to stand up and to have some courage, even though these are, we live in a cancel culture. So thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Oh, yeah.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
There was a little echo, and I think so now it's gone.
I don't know. I had all the echo cancellation on.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to.
I don't know if it's just Matthew, because no one else is saying it. It might be that he has
maybe multiple
another version
screens
of the
open.
podcast open on another page
Yeah.
or something, because it streams on multiple social sites.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what to say. Nobody else is saying.
And I had all of our echo cancellation turned on for all the mics, so I don't have any explanation.
If anyone else had that issue, tell us in the comment thread just so we can assess if it's a one-off thing or like a pattern.
Yeah.
To be honest.
I heard a little bit of an echo. I could hear a little bit but I don't hear it now. So maybe it had something to do with Dan's connection. So
okay. All right.
I didn't hear an echo at all, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if it's a widespread
I didn't hear it
issue,
either. I've got it set up the best I can. I don't know what else I could do differently. So
well, yeah, now I don't hear it, so that's fine. But that was this is a breaking story.
yeah.
This is going to be a national story. I guarantee this is going to go national. Jessica, you said you've heard. I have not heard of a high school situation like this where girls are exposed to male genitalia in the shower, and it's a direct result of a policy that is, like Dan said, it's confusing. People don't know what is legal, what is not legal. What are we supposed to do? Even the administrators didn't know, or I think, Jessica, you could be right. They know, but they're afraid. They may know, and they're just.
There's probably a mixed bag, right? Some are afraid and think it's wrong, but they don't want to be canceled. And other people maybe are for it. You know what I mean? It's probably a mixed bag. I just know from the experience of Jim and I that there are a lot of teachers in the schools that are really upset about this kind of thing, and
there are a lot of people that are upset. A lot.
Yeah,
and I can tell you,
they're afraid.
I get contacted by many teachers, many administrators that are not happy with this. And unfortunately, a lot of them are retiring early, or they tell me they're just waiting, they're counting the years till they're out. It's really unfortunate. There are still good schools. There are still good districts. And Waukesha is one where they've been battling, and they're not backing down, but it's a lot of work, and they experience a lot of hate and vitriol, and they're maligned. Germantown is doing a great job. Slinger's doing a great job. I think there are a lot of areas that are, that they're shifting. They were able to turn their boards, but I mean, right in Sheboygan Falls, this is your future, Sheboygan. This is your future. So I would advise, if you're a parent in Sheboygan right now, this is something where one of the school board members, Ed Bray, he's been fighting this in Sheboygan County. There's Judy Poole and my friend John. They're trying to bring awareness that this is coming, and they're trying to prevent it. And the best way is a policy like Russ had told me, that provide accommodation for someone who is trans-identifying, provide a space for them, make sure that they feel safe, but do not compromise the same-sex spaces of girls.
That's what I think is so shocking in this story, is that the school district's actually implying that it was the duty of the 14-year-old girls to remove themselves from their girls' locker room, rather than the duty of the 18-year-old male to remove himself or be removed by school staff. I think that is it's shocking that we're at this place in society. And I have to tell you, I wonder if, we talk about the left always pushes until they go too far. And I wonder if this isn't the tilting point where we've now gone too far, that we actually have adult males showering with juveniles, and will society say that's enough? That's where we draw the line. This is pushing it too far. And I also wonder about the conflict between state law and federal law. If Title IX does apply to transgenders, then how do we resolve the conflict between adult males exposing themselves to young children, which is clearly a violation of state law, but yet if you have a federal Title IX saying no, that's okay, how are we going to resolve that?
I don't know.
I think it'll be interesting to see what the media do with this. Because of course in other situations, I know they weren't the same thing, but you know, Will got painted as stirring up hate. You know,
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get
community.
painted. I'm sure we're going to get, probably blasted as being transphobic or whatever the latest term is for exposing the story. I don't care. I think this is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, you don't have to care because you're your self-employer. When people work in liberal environments, unfortunately, the climate is so incredibly toxic and cancel culture is so strong around this area that people have to care, you know, when they work in very, very liberal environments. But I think in the past, we've seen the media immediately plant a narrative on these kinds of stories that, like you said, you know, people are transphobic, Will is stirring up hate. And that's the narrative that locks in. And so with a case, honestly, this extreme, right? This is probably the most extreme one we've heard of in a high school. We'll see what the media, what they do with it. Do they censor it completely? Do they cover it? Do they spin their typical narrative against, against Will, against parents, against the rights of parents? Again, with all of these things, they're competing rights. Yeah. And I think cancel culture only acknowledges like one set of feelings, one set of alleged rights, and it disregards, the rights of the parents, the rights of the 14-year-old girls. So I think that will be interesting. Now, Scarlett, I had mentioned, I've heard of something, not in a high school, but there was, I don't want to go into great detail because honestly, I'm going by memory and I don't want to get facts wrong. And I worked there, so I can really go there. But there was a case at UWM. There was a locker room controversy at UW Milwaukee, and in the Kalachi Center, there are sometimes underage people who go in locker rooms because they come there to work out with their parents and they come there to swim and things like that. And so if you're interested, you can probably Google UWM transgender locker room and you'll get all the stories. It bore, if I recall correctly, some analogies to this debate, but it wasn't in a high school. And we're talking about freshman girls in this case.
Yeah, this is freshman.
I'm not taking a stance. I'm sorry, to be clear, I just want to be really clear. I'm not taking a stance on the UWM controversy one way or the other. I'm not taking a position on that specific controversy because I just don't want to do that because I work there. So I want to be crystal clear on that. I am not taking a side on that one, but I am simply saying there was a somewhat analogous, controversy that you all can look up.
I do not think the media is going to report on this because there isn't a good angle for them. There just isn't. They're going to ignore this because they can't spin this the right way. 4 girls were exposed to a 18-year-old, 4 14-year-old girls were exposed to the male penis of an 8-year-old who showered right next to them. I guarantee you there wasn't, he could have kind of gone around the corner. There could have been, right next to them, and then turned and exposed himself. I'm sorry, the complaint doesn't say this, but I'm saying this. That was purposeful in my mind. That's purposeful. That's why I think it's predatory. And I think that's why it should have been reported or at least looked into to make sure it wasn't predatory. But these girls, then not contacting the parents, excluding the parents from this. I mean, they have to know eventually the girls are going to tell their parents this is going to get out. And they don't want to take responsibility. They don't want to, and their main communication with the parents was emails. The parents had to force a face-to-face meeting. All of these very sensitive topics. And then what Dan said right at the beginning, it's at the beginning of this complaint, that the vice principal said, if the girls have a problem, they can come find me. That's ridiculous. 4 girls experiencing a traumatic sexual encounter are expected to go find the principal instead of the principal dropping everything and to go counsel those girls. I promise you, had there been discrimination against that trans identifying boy by those girls, they would have dropped everything and they would have immediately dealt with it. Had that boy been the one complaining that his rights were violated, they would drop everything.
Let's bring up that case. I believe it was up in Kiel last year, where there was actually federal suit filed against two 14-year-old boys because I believe they failed to address a transgender boy like with their proper pronouns. And
they
so
were in
the
eighth
school,
grade.
What's that?
They were in 8th grade. They were
right.
eighth
Yeah,
grade.
I think they're 13 or 14, and that they actually, the school district took it as far as to go ahead and charge and try to file federal charges against those boys. So you're exactly right.
And the will had just argued a case for Kettle Moraine, and we don't know how that they've just argued to have summary arguments. So they petitioned for summary arguments, where in the case of Kettle Moraine, where the district started to social transition their daughter without their permission. And the good news about that story is the parents pulled their daughter out. And once she was out of that environment and in a different school, within, I think I read 4 to 6 weeks, she stopped, basically desisted in a social transition. She's now a happy and healthy teenage girl who is grateful to parents that fought for her. And I would advise that as parents, we have to fight. This is the hill I'm willing to die on. This is the fight that this is about reality. This is about biological reality. If an adult identifies as trans, I don't care. That's fine. You do you. It's not bothering me. But there is reality, and especially with young kids, you have to be aware of the fact that you can't allow biological teenage boys and biological teenage girls in spaces where they're going to shower and interact. Look at what happened in Virginia. Do we want that to happen here? Do we want a case where there is an actual sexual assault, 2 rapes in a bathroom? Why do you think there's Glenn Youngkin for governor? It had to get to the point in Loudoun County where teenage girls were raped before they woke up and parents realized we're going to help. We need to fix this. And they got a new governor. Yeah. I would hope that in Wisconsin, we are sensible enough and smart enough to see the potential pitfalls of just embracing a policy that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's harmful to girls. And we need to stand up and fight for them, because if we don't, no one will.
You're good. Jessica, you got anything to add?
Just that I'm glad Will exists.
Thank God for Will. We just had Rick Essenberg on last night, and discussing now that the liberals control the Supreme Court, what does that mean? And boy, it's just amazing the way
last night.
Yeah, we had a heck of a fiery podcast last night. Anyone missed it, I encourage you to go watch it.
Please.
Yeah, but then we wake up this morning and find out about this, and this is just, thank God we have the Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty, because if we didn't have them, who would be fighting for these four young girls that had to be witness to this?
And
I'm glad that we have a mechanism to get what they're doing to a broader audience.
Yeah.
With through our filter, so that people get it just sort of unfettered, as opposed to with liberal media narratives attached. Right. And that's a tribute to you, Jim, because this podcast was your idea and you worked really hard to get me to do it and to set it up. And I give you actually a lot of credit as well for that, because what a wonderful interview that just was with him.
Yeah.
And Rick last night was, I hope people listen to the Rick Essenberg interview, because he's an extraordinary intellect and said so many interesting things about the Supreme Court and the legal battles to come. he gave me more hope. And I don't know. So I'm just thankful, Jim, that you put all the energy into creating this podcast.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Well, we're going on an hour here. I have another meeting I have to hop on to. So if anyone else has any parting comments, or else I think we'll end it.
No, I'm glad that we were able to do this. I'm glad that this is going to be a big story. This is going to be a national story.
Absolutely.
And I ask if you follow me on Twitter, Scarlett for Kids. I have the documents up, and on Will, they have the whole formal complaint. So go to Will's website. Jessica just wrote an article about this that's on Wisconsin Right Now. So please go to any of these sources, all of them, and also file a comment. Please don't forget, file a comment in opposition to the proposed Title IX changes, which will eliminate girls-only sports, and which will continue to, if enacted, girls will not have safe spaces. So fight for that. And thank you guys for doing this, and I'm glad that people know about this. And if you're on a school board, please use this as a cautionary tale and share this with other members who are considering adopting this policy, and warn them, hey, we don't want to get into this kind of trouble. Let's hold back, and let's not move forward with a very controversial policy that's going to lead to devastating outcomes.
So I was laughing because Matthew Allen was like, I'm still recovering from the marathon last night. So am I.
Yeah. So we all woke up a little hungover this morning, I think, from that. Yeah.
Jumped off
Fox News has a story already. Look at that.
What's that?
Fox News has a story already. Well, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Good day, all.
Bye. Have a
All right,
good
bye,
weekend,
guys.
everybody.
Bye.
You too. Bye.